Well, I highly doubt it's too late to do a live, even though it is Sunday night. Um, we're approaching we're approaching the midnight hour, but I think there's plenty of time to do a quick live stream. And I'm wondering if anybody's going to show up here. We're going to talk about handlers tonight. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the infiltrator. I want to talk about the honeypot, right? The derailer, the hunter killer, the those individuals who, well, they get their fingers in your business, and there's a lot of them. Some of them get close to you. Some of them are more random and targeted individuals. Well, they deal with a lot of different types of these characters, and we got somebody out there. Welcome to the Sunday night live stream. Hopefully, more of you guys will show up. Could have been a rough weekend for some of you. I know I've seen some things in the comments that would lead me to believe there's some people out there who are suffering. There's people out there who need, well, they need to be distracted. They need hope. You know, I know that I've been down all those roads, and that's why I do these videos. Okay, when I started this whole nightmare, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't have anyone to relate with. There was no targeted individual community out there, period. In fact, even the term gang stalking did not exist. And I didn't know what was going on. And it was very frightening. It was very lonely. It was very demoralizing. And that's just the way it is for targets. I would imagine that most of you who are either going to listen to this tonight or join in or are going to listen to it later, you probably don't have anyone to talk to in your community. You probably are limited to online activity for gang stalking as far as affirmation and people that you can relate with, people who are dealing with the phenomena of group harassment, of gang stalking. And I have no idea who's out there. We got another one. Welcome to the Sunday night live stream. Well, who knows? Maybe everyone else is asleep. Oh man. Today was a little stressful. I went to work, made some cash, and the little kitty got out. I had to wait for her to get cold, and she finally came back after a few hours of running around. I don't let her out anymore. And I've talked about the fact that targeted individuals who have pets, well, they can deal with some complex issues. I mean, I've seen some pretty demoralizing things in this whole ordeal concerning pets, the little friends that the stalkers, that the perps, they love to attack them. And there was a guy in the comments that he mentioned having a guard dog is a good asset for a target, but at the same time they can be a liability because a lot of this stuff is emotional manipulation, and they will attack and kill your pets. Sometimes I would imagine, especially in the case of a guard dog, they want to get rid of that you know I don't know, that deterrence, because these guys like to break into your house, right? And there's nothing more loyal than a guard dog. You know, they will fight to the death to protect their master, and they guard the territory. They consider your house theirs. You know, and they don't they don't take a break. Getting notifications. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Sorry about that. I hate that. Some of the gig work out there that I do, They send so many messages, and it's demoralizing. It's a button fest. I hate that when I'm out working. Do you want this delivery? No, I don't want that delivery. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want the delivery? Um, are you done delivering it? Are you confirming that you've picked up the order? Are you sure? It's like, man, I've got to drive and do all this stuff. Quit sending me so many damn notifications. It drives you crazy. And they're always making updates. Anyway, we got 4 people out there. Um, one thumbs up. And I want to see if you guys are going to be active in the comments. Anybody have any comments on the topic tonight? We're going to look at handlers. It's probably going to be a pretty short live stream, but you never know. I might start rambling on and on. Sometimes I have a tendency to do that. Looks like we had somebody drop off. Anybody have anything to start out with? Any comments on handlers, on perps, on infiltrators, the derailers? Anybody have anything? I'm looking. No comments yet. Well, that's fine. Like I said before, there are a lot of different characters that can be involved in gang stalking. And, typically when people talk about this, the focus is usually on, people that might be working for, I don't know, the government or the cops or the CIA or maybe a private investigating firm. And those guys are some of the most frightening that you are going to deal with. Okay. Because when a targeted individual gets harassed, their life is invaded from a lot of different angles. And it's the professionals. Okay. Those guys, I mean, it's not just hard to deal with them, it's almost literally impossible to deal with them. And I've talked about the fact that, targets are set up. It's not like all of a sudden, a group of people gets together. I mean, it could probably happen that way. Okay. I've talked about, the dark web, activity or individuals who get together to mess with a target. But I'm talking about a classic targeted individual who's experiencing higher forms of harassment, and they start to experience the classic trauma-based mind control, the infiltration into your life, because all these perps, all these handlers, all the chain yankers, they infiltrate. But when you're dealing with the professional individuals, well, sometimes they're probably breaking into your house long before you even know that they're there, long before you even knew you were selected for this little hunting party, long before you knew that you were a targeted individual. You were dealing with them. You just didn't know they were there, because until a target is hit hard, you're just kind of going through life as normal. You're not sensitized. You're not conditioned. You're not really paying attention to any of this. You're observing your environment. You know what is going on around you, but you're not looking for it. Okay. And that's part of the job of, the first, I don't know, line of attack, the people that have been hired to shake you up, right? They get dirt on you. They might break in. They may hack your phone and observe you. Who knows how long? It could be, I mean, I'm speculating, obviously. It could be up to a year or more, depending on what you're dealing with before they even do anything to you. They could be surrounding you, watching your habits and so on and so forth. Keeping track of the places that you go, maybe the convenience stores, what time you take out the trash, what time you go to bed, who you're talking to, how often you interact with your neighbors, all those things. The things that you buy in the supermarket, you know. I've heard that from targets before that, not only are they experiencing strange things concerning maybe electronic equipment. In other words, their laptops and stuff start to malfunction. Everything seems to be hacked. they start experiencing problems. And, it can go to a lot of different levels. And, it can happen that way. And then you start trying to figure out what's going on. And it seems like every area of your life is just a mess, you know. And these guys will get in and do that kind of thing. And they will start doing stuff like that. And it's not just, in other words, it's not just one area of your life. When they infiltrate everything. And you're dealing with all kinds of possibilities at that point. Some targeted individuals experience, the infiltration in a sense where it's not necessarily food tampering, but in the beginning, you don't know. I mean, you could be getting covertly drugged and not even know that you're a targeted individual. It just depends on what they have planned. Let's take a look at the comments before we get into this real quick. My mother's husband is a handler. Techno Kid, welcome to the live stream. Describing it would be so much easier by speaking than writing. Yeah, well, and that's a problem with the comments, and I understand. You're going to have to give me a little bit of leeway on that. There's nothing I could do about that. And just try to generalize your stuff. I would love to up the ante on this. Get some equipment, get a phone for or some type of scenario. And I know you can get that kind of equipment. I've seen that. I don't have that, where people can call in and so on and so forth. And maybe one of these days, we'll get to that point. The only reason I haven't gone that far yet is because we had so many perps coming in and trying to disrupt, trying to shake things up. And I want an interview with you, doctor. I want to question you about your beliefs. And there's accusations, and they always ruin everything. So at this point, I've just decided to ignore those people. But I realize that, so you got, it looks like Techno Kid is dealing with some classic stuff. And it sounds like he's got some real close interactions going on. And it has to do with his mother's. I don't know if she's married. I'm assuming that that's the case. Obviously, he says husband in here. Let's take a look. He was assigned to us and then set my mother up with that criminal. I'm assuming that you deal with a lot of setups. You deal with a lot of different scenarios when it comes to the handlers. Let's take a look at here. We got an average Joe here. Gangstalkers, sleeper cells waiting to notice. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard. I don't have my damn glasses with me again, but I'm gonna do the best I can. Become overt, and then that's when they slam you. Yeah, well, they sneak up around you. Absolutely, that's classic behavior for the handler. And then Techno Kid says, for example, all the houses that we lived in with him, he set his desk instead of the having his own study room in the living room in such a way that he would keep us all under his supervision. So the guy was a control freak. He was sounds like almost an exhibitionist as well, like a Zoom kind of thing. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I haven't, it's I want to do that because it is frustrating when people want to interact. They've got to deal with the limited amount of words they can put in the comment section, and that can be a real hindrance here. And then Anonymous says, however, they will also weaponize your past traumatic experiences. Absolutely. And they do. They'll get dirt. They'll profile you, and they'll get information. They love that kind of stuff. So getting back into this handler discussion, there's low level individuals that you're going to be dealing with. Because when targeted individuals begin their little trek into the nightmarish realm of gang stalking, A lot of it's strangers. I mean, there's people around you, but a lot of the weird stuff is going to come from people you don't even know. Okay, and that's when you have someone that knows you who uses personal information or something like that, or starts to act out of character. The first thing that runs through your mind is, what's up with that? I mean, are they on something? Did I do something to make you angry? What's going on? And it's out of character. It's strange. Okay, but when a target gets hit with personal information from someone they've never met before, or they get that directed conversation from individuals they have no idea who they are, or it might be at work with, because a lot of times when targeted individuals experience workplace harassment, there'll be people that just show up and get hired on, you know, and they'll be the ones that really start playing around with the target. And it depends on who you are. And I've mentioned this before that I used to lift a lot of weights. I was a wrestler and I was into martial arts. And anyone who would have profiled me back in the day would have been like, if you try to mess with this guy or scare him, you're not going to be able to do it because he will kick your ass. And I would have. Okay. Not that I would have been violent and be like, well, let's go fight. I mean, not like that. But as far as if you want to scare me and threaten me, I just laugh at you back then. I just humiliate you. Okay. I lived and breathed martial arts and MMA and all that stuff. And, I mean, now I'm crippled. So, I mean, there's nothing I can do now, really. If you got too close to me, I could probably, make you wish you hadn't, messed with me. But the point is, back then, it was different. And so I noticed that when I first started to experience workplace harassment, and it did start all at once. And I didn't, they were trying to freak me out. I've played mind games before, and I was just, I didn't care. And then all of a sudden, this guy shows up, and he was like, he looked like somebody that ate steroids when he was a kid, and he wasn't your average individual. Okay, he had a big mouth, and there was another guy that showed up too, and so they were trying to kind of intimidate me, like, oh yeah, if we start doing, because at first these people were kind of afraid to come out of the box. We're talking about back then. I had about, let me see, a 29-inch waist and about a 64, 65-inch chest. Okay. I mean, I wasn't, when I was in high school, I used to lift weights for 2 to 4 hours per day. Okay. So a lot of that stays with you if you do it natural. So I noticed that, as far as the triangulation, as far as, just introducing this whole game when I first started experiencing workplace harassment, they did that. And then there would be people that would just, get hired on, and you could tell they weren't just there to, deliver pizza or, do some roofing or whatever I was into. That they showed up there at least, and that's the way it appeared to me for that particular purpose. And then you got to assume what's up with that. It's like the targeted individual that gets attacked, by those individuals that they don't know, whether it's a directed conversation or an innuendo, and they've got personal information. It's obvious in your face. And so that's one of the levels. I'm gonna go into the comments real quick here and see what's going on. Demons are dumb. Why you skip my comment? I wasn't even looking at the comments. Let me see here. Well, I'm going to get back into this topic real quick, and then I'll start taking some more because I've already kind of played around in the comments. Um, so those are the low level people. There you could put them in a lot of different categories. The derailers and so on and so forth. You can have people that are close to you, they're going to do that too. But the real infiltrators, that's when you get into the close quarter stuff, where you've got the honeypot, of course, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with that. And that, those individuals, they go right along with the long con. people, the individuals who they gain your trust. They, they can be good friends until they're not. Okay, and I've had a lot of experiences with that where I'll deal with people now, for example, after I've experienced all these things over time. I've been conditioned and so on and so forth. And I'll get to know somebody. Well, you don't trust me? Do you trust me? I've known you for a long time. Well, I've known people and I've been friends with individuals before for years. When this whole thing started, and I would have swore that, you know, that these people would never do that to me, that I could trust them. But you know what? That's just the way the world is. And when it comes to gang stalking and dealing with higher forms of harassment where you got everything for people being paid or the social dynamics, the money is a big deal a lot of times with individuals like that, but sometimes it can be spiritual too. And that's where you get into individuals that it's speculative, but I've heard this before where they'll just get into your life and all the demons that are latched onto them. It's almost like I don't know, it's a type of, I'm not saying they're transferring to you, but they're getting into your geographical location. It's almost like playing tag or something, right? I'm not one of those people that believe that if you're a Christian that you can, be possessed. I don't think that's biblical, but you can certainly be oppressed, you know. And what is that? Well, that means that they're around you and they enter into your life through people a lot of times. I've noticed that you get around someone and whatever is around them starts to kind of try to latch onto you. It's pretty creepy. So you got that little game of tag that can go on, and that can, even when you get into the honeypot thing, especially for Christian targeted individuals, of course, you're not supposed to be having premarital sex, right? That's fornication, or in the case that this individual, and I had that happen one time. I had a girl that this wasn't that long ago. This was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, where I was introduced to this individual through someone, and we were kind of dating a little bit, just this is right away, and I had no idea, but it was thrown on me at the last minute that, oh, she's still married, and I'm like, what? Well, gee, thanks a lot. And the strange thing about it, with the same night, because I was supposed to, I was going to pick her up and everything. And this guy had thought, to me, it was evil. It was a setup because he's all this, this person's, such a wonderful girl and blah, 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 blah. And then after I had gotten to know her and all of a sudden all these little plans and everything, and I had invested myself in the whole situation to the point where they threw it on me then. Right. And she even brought it up the same night. And it was like, well, what do you think that I'm not going to back out of this or something? It was, and he was being a smart ass. Good luck. We'll have fun now. And it was like, well, there's a motive there. Either they're trying to get me in a real nasty scenario, or they just wanted to, I don't know, piss me off or get me in a place where they could emotionally manipulate me. But it was a setup, man. And so you can deal with a lot of different stuff when you get into the honeypot. But when people do infiltrate your life, well, there's a lot of goals involved. They could just be surveillance. They could just be, gathering information on you, observing how you are reacting to all this stress that you're dealing with, or what you're doing about it, or if you're grinding metal, if you're getting stressed, if you're sleeping. And I've noticed too that even now, when you get infiltrators, and all you targets out there know what I'm talking about, you're going to get a lot of questions. And be wary. Be like one of those people who just, you don't give out a whole lot of information about what's going on in your personal life. I would suggest to all targeted individuals who are experiencing harassment, You're not one of those people that advertises what's going on in your emotional life, what you're thinking about, blah, whatever. Don't be advertising that stuff. And because, especially when it comes to gang stalking, and a lot of people will ask me, is it okay to talk about this? What you do whatever you want. But the thing you have to remember, not only are there just the two crowds of people, the people that know about it, the people that don't, but remember this, that the individuals that you're dealing with that know about it, they are watching because, they are getting information on you. They are looking for your weaknesses. They're looking for the things that you're reacting to. They want to see, how things are working for you mentally, how much it's getting to you. And the thing that I've talked about before, I didn't say anything to anybody. And I noticed that there were some people that were involved in my life that all of a sudden they just kept persistently asking me all these probing questions. And I was silent. I didn't say a word about it to anyone. I didn't say anything, man. And I was still hanging out with people, and they kept bringing up stuff. Oh, you'd tell me if something was going on, wouldn't you? You'd let me know if you were having trouble with something. And I could tell right away it was out of character for them. And basically it was a huge red flag. And that was, yeah, you're a perp. You're you're obviously, because I wasn't letting off that anything was going on. So they're just basically telling on themselves. You want to have the upper hand on that. Okay. The other thing I would suggest is that if you do talk to people, you want to put some disinformation in there because a lot of times you will be triangulated. A lot of times people will get together and talk behind your back, even if you're not a targeted individual. And if you put a little tiny little tidbit of information in there that's not necessarily true, kind of camouflage yourself a little bit. Well, if somebody else tries to use something in street theater or whatever, well, you're going to know exactly where it came from. You're going to know the exact origins of that, right? Because you're in control of that information at that point. And if someone tries to use, I've done that several times, you know, especially to those people that are very inquisitive, asking key questions, give themselves right away. One of the other goals is obviously just to yank your chain, and then of course you have the disinformation agents, right? That's now that we're still at the low level stuff. We're not even talking about people that are gonna, get close to you and stick the knife in, or try to covertly poison you, or poison your mind. Right? It might not even be something like physical. It might just be poisoning your mind, getting you within earshot. But a lot of times when you're dealing with the close infiltrator with that long con perp, they want you to feel comfortable making yourself vulnerable. Okay. And a lot of times, and I've talked about this in a lot of videos, that the red flag is that they're going to bring up these issues. They're going to talk about trust. They're going to talk about emotions and so on and so forth. And they're going to be trying to get you in a place where you open up to them because, of course, what's the goal? It's to stab you in the back. Maximum emotional currency. Because if you're a target that's dealing with higher forms of harassment, the ultimate goal, not only is it to infiltrate your life, but it is to isolate you and to get you in a place of hopelessness and despair, to where you can't talk, where you can't trust, where you're so paranoid that even if no one is after you, even if nobody is doing anything, you're just to that point where you're conditioned and sensitized and so traumatized by this that they don't have to. They can just yank your chain every now and again. They don't have to send perps into your life. You're just in that state, right? They want you eventually to get to the point where you won't trust anybody. But here's the trick to that is, first of all, you don't have to. Okay, you don't have to trust anybody. I don't. A lot of people will. That's the first thing that pops into my mind when someone we'll start talking about that stuff. And that's another goal for infiltrators and handlers is that they, not only are they infiltrating, but they do it in a way where eventually they want to help gaslight you, right? And so what's part of that process? They accuse you, man, right? What's wrong? You're paranoid. I don't know. You're talking in circles. Are you okay? Something's wrong with you. And just, if nothing else, yank your chain. But eventually, the accusations are going to come out of those guys. It always happens that way. And I'm gonna go over to the comments again. I'm not ignoring anyone, but I'm just kind of rambling on here because I'm setting this whole thing up. And it seems like we got some dialogue going on in there. Looks like Anonymous is talking about the psychiatric agenda out there. The idea that businesses and institutions are profiting off your something is very real. Absolutely, it is. And that's that's another real strange coincidence. I mean, you can see the modus operandi of group harassment involves the criteria of psychiatry to where it fits into the persecutory delusion, the delusion of grandeur, right? So that if the target tries to get help, they're just going to look nuts. It's part of the discrediting process, but it goes beyond that, I think. And it's not only are those things true, but and I've talked about the fact that targeted individuals are part of a menagerie just in the world in general. Not, it's not even just a government thing, it's everything. And when you get into deception, when you get into creating those illusions, and just the idea that targeted individuals are crazy, that they're all experiencing some kind of mass hallucination. Well, that's for a lot of reasons. That's ridiculous. Okay, obviously, to me, it is pretty obvious. But the rest of the world is going to buy into that, and well, not everybody. The perps know, but to them, you know, the gang stalking community, they're just people suffering from mental illness, right? And I've talked about the fact that, and this is just my opinion, that at the roots of all the scenarios that targeted individuals are dealing with, it's basically for me a form of demonic oppression. Okay, I don't care whether you're involved in some type of MK Ultra extended program, or you're being targeted by a secret society or whatever. I don't care if it's the Illuminati. I don't. It doesn't matter. It's still part of that menagerie, and part of that menagerie involves social coercion, but it also involves deception, and that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea behind this. If and if they convince people that mental illness, according to the criteria of psychiatry, is true, then not only does that obfuscate gang stalking, but it obfuscates the involvement of the spiritual dimension. Because a lot of times, and this is just something that I believe, and I've talked about the fact that I believe technology comes from the spiritual dimension. When targeted individuals are experiencing symptoms of electronic harassment, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a government thing. It could be, absolutely could be, but it could be something else too. Okay. Oh my gosh. Hold on a minute. My cat is freaking out. Hold on. Oh, that's okay. Okay. There's a tomcat outside. Sorry. It scared me. Boy, she's getting aggressive tonight. Anyway, getting back to the point, you have different things that are being thrown not only at targeted individuals, but they are being thrown at society in general, and that is the menagerie. Okay, that people are going to form propositions in their mind. One of the, what's the popular proposition? Well, targets are just they're crazy, right? They just went nuts. You're hallucinating. You're experiencing a persecutory delusion, all that stuff. It's all part of it. Getting back to well, let me look at the comments real quick and see what's going on here. Well, not a whole lot. Bora Bora. Hello. Let me go back and take a Mats and Miles, Dr. D. Well, tonight I am. And by the way, just in case, I've been accused of masquerading as an actual doctor. And for all intents and purposes, by default, which is de facto, I'm my own doctor. And I am your doctor tonight. And I'm the gangstalking, but I'm not a real doctor, just in case. I've got some pretty hostile stuff come at me before. You're preventing people from getting real treatment and all. Oh yeah, there's a lot of that out there, isn't there, guys? Oh yeah, a lot of legitimate psychiatric help for the poor targeted individual, crazy schizophrenic community. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, getting back into the goals of handlers, there is the disinformation. And of course, they're also there to help discredit the targeted individual. You talk about the flying monkeys involved in narcissist abuse or whatever, and they will surround the target. And of course, there's going to be a lot of people talking behind the back of the target. There's going to be a lot of that stuff going on. And what happens when people are recruited? Because you got two different kinds of people that are being recruited, right? Some of the people are genuinely concerned and they're buying into the disinformation because a lot of times, let's just face it, targets do become dysfunctional. This stuff is crazy. When you start, experiencing gang stalking, when you start getting hit with all this stuff, you're going to be a nervous wreck. Okay. You're going to have a hard time. It's going to look like legitimate mental illness. It's going to look like all of a sudden you're manifesting an anxiety disorder. Okay. It's designed that way. And so you can have people who are genuinely concerned. But as far as the flying monkeys, as far as the perps that are trying to discredit you, well, they're doing that on purpose. And I'm just worried. I'm worried. They're not acting right. And then of course they're gonna sow the seeds. And that's when the target really moves out into that zone of isolation. And eventually they want you to be the scapegoat. And if you get into that place where you start experiencing obvious, dysfunction and so on and so forth, then you can move into that realm where people, well, automatically by social dynamic, they're gonna start picking you out for harassment, and they're not involved. And a lot of times, targeted individuals will assume that they're like, well, these people are paid perps. Not necessarily. It depends on who it is. And just because you're getting an attitude at that point, depending on how long you've been targeted in your community or how many people have become involved or how extensive it is, it might just be that dynamic where now you're just targeted for that. You fit into that place of the scapegoat. They love to discredit. They love to recruit, and then after that, you're looking at the heavy stuff. You're looking at the gaslighting, right? The accusations, all the emotional theater, to where you'll be set up in different situations, and then you're supposed to internalize it. All the dysfunction, all the problems that you're trying to keep ahead of the game. If you're a target who's experiencing heavy harassment, you're not going to be able to keep up with it. Okay, because you've got things to do. Things are going to, that's why I talk about simplifying your life. Forget about trying to stop this. Forget about controlling other people. You know, forget about trying to, stand up for yourself and fight for justice. Logic is off the table. If you're a targeted individual and you're concerned about getting justice for yourself, you're going to drive yourself nuts. They love that. And I've talked about you can get baited into a lot of scenarios as a target, you know. Well, that's not right. It's not fair. Well, of course it's not. That's the whole point. And if they can get you upset, if they can get you emotional about whatever it is they're, harassing you about, attacking you, playing little games with you, whatever it is, well, That's pay for them. That's gold. Because as long as they're getting you emotional, as long as they're getting a reaction out of you, as long as they're getting you to think about this stuff and stew and grind metal and regurgitate this stuff and get angry or whatever, however primitive they're the tactics are, that's what they want. They have to, because if they don't, they can't manipulate you. They can't control you that way. And of course, uh, you know, it even gets to the point where you will be dealing with food tampering and maybe covert poisoning and drugging and all that stuff along with the gas. It gets heavy. Okay. Um, and they'll wait for moments of weakness too. Okay. And then, of course, you're going to get accused of outbursts or whatever. They might even try to provoke you around other people, or they might play a long game with you and just nitpick at you. Okay, because it's like that, especially, for example, when targets experience the V2K or whatever you're dealing with, whether you think it's demonic or technology or whatever. What's the constant annoyance, right? It's a distraction. It's something that is there, and not only to freak you out, not only to hopefully get you to tell people that you're hearing voices or something, which that never works out, by the way, just in case you guys haven't figured that out. If you're a new target and you're like, I'm thinking about telling everybody that I'm experiencing V2K or hearing voices, well, good luck with that, because of course, that never works. It's one of the it's one of the most powerful weapons to discredit a target. You're hearing voices. Oh, wow. Yeah. What are they telling you? Oh, you're having intrusive thoughts. Oh, wow. Well, here, man. Well, yeah, I feel like trusting you now, right? Even if they're genuine, of course, you've kind of discredited yourself. You're just telling the truth. You're being honest, but it doesn't work. Um, so it's a constant annoyance, and what they'll try to create a mental glitch, and gang stalking is like that, because they want to infiltrate your life. They want to get you to form false propositions, like everybody's in on this. Everybody knows. Everybody you run into is a gang stalker. Everybody with a that doesn't replace their headlight is after you. Everybody wearing a red shirt is stalking you. Every time you see a white van, they're hunting you down. False propositions. Does that mean it can't happen? Well, obviously it happens, but they want you to take it to the next level. Okay. And they want you to believe that people can read your mind. I've talked about that too. In fact, I'm going to bring that up real quick, because that goes into it. I erased that live stream, because when targets get attacked, well, that's some real heavy stuff. And it's an illusion in the sense that there's a lot of different ways that people can have that information. If you're one of those targets that you think that there's no other possible way that these people could know the things that are popping into your head, think again. Okay. And I've given biblical examples, and I've talked about this stuff, and it doesn't always necessarily involve government technology. It might involve technology. It might be things that are coming out of the spiritual dimension. And if you've looked into the book of Enoch and other things like that, you'll see that, whether it's, the ability to make spears or metallurgy or all that stuff that goes all back into the secret societies, that stuff was handed down from the spiritual dimension. So technology, not against it, not against technology. But when you get into the clairvoyant stuff, like Paul and Silas in Philippi, they were dealing with a soothsayer. Okay. If any of you have ever had experiences with the occult, which I've had a lot of that is based on that. Even the stuff that has deceived the elite. When you get into the secret societies, when you get into the Rosicrucians, they are in charge of that hidden knowledge and secret wisdom, technically, in the hierarchy, which is out there, beginning with the Freemasons, the Illuminati. Then you get the Rosicrucians, who have the hidden knowledge and secret wisdom. It's all mingled in there. But when you get into the occult, like witchcraft, or you get into the deeper forms of astrology and stuff like that, well, there's a type of foreknowledge. And if you're one of those targets, you have to consider that kind of stuff, because at the root even if you are dealing, even if you have, proof of, the men in black, following you around, people in sunglasses, or you catch somebody handing out information in your neighborhood that's, damning or false or whatever, where people believe you're some kind of deviant, it doesn't mean that there's not a demonic element. It doesn't mean that there's not a spiritual foundation to this whole thing. And when it comes down to it, man, they have that type of foreknowledge, whether you believe it's coming from the divine counsel that individuals like the late Dr. Michael Heiser talked about, or whatever, whether it's something there to test people or however it works, because it can work both ways. That can be a delusion sent to an individual to confuse them, or it can be something to test an individual. That's when you get into Deuteronomy 13, when Paul was persecuting Christians. He believed in that. Because you're not supposed to show sympathy for anyone who tries to draw you away from the true God, right? And as far as he was concerned, all the miracles and all that stuff, everything that was going on that he observed for people that were believing in Jesus Christ, they were violating Deuteronomy 13. To him, when he was killing Christians and persecuting them, he assumed that he was following God's word. And he says that when he said, I did it in ignorance. That's what he was talking about. But when you get into this clairvoyant type of street theater where it seems like people are reading your mind and all that, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Okay. It could be coming from something like that. But that's another element to this whole thing. I'm going to jump into the comments real quick. Well, Binks the cat, he says that type of activity is mesmerizing. It is. It's a heavy, sensational type of way to get the target's attention. It's simply the same thing that goes on when personal information is used against a target from someone they don't know, or someone that shouldn't know your personal business. Same thing. Does that mean that there's cameras all over in your bathroom? Not necessarily. Could be that way. A lot of times it happens that way, so you just don't know. These people play God, and when you try to show them that that's not God, it's a trick, people will defend the villains, thinking they're standing up for their faith, and villainize you. Well, I don't. Yeah, well, they do play God, definitely, and that's been going on ever since the beginning of this whole thing. That's really how all this started. Technically, if you want to get into biblical stuff. But as far as gang stalking is concerned, they love that. They do. They masquerade as a type of elite human, right? You're out of our group. You're not good enough to fit in. That's one of the messages that goes at the targeted individual. You're on the outside of this whole thing. You're a second class citizen, right? And we're watching you. And in fact, even more than that, we're not pleased with what we've seen. You better watch out. And for this reason, that reason, the disinformation starts to mount, the fear and the anxiety begins to multiply in the target's life. And it's always classic. It's the same. It's not even difficult to do a sort of a cold read with the provided stimulus. I agree with that. I think that it's real easy to do a shotgun technique on a targeted individual because you already know the themes, right? I mean, I could do that. One of these days, maybe in my videos, I'll put a little sound bite in there and simulate that type of directed conversation because it's pretty easy, right? And it involves all the themes that any targeted individual would deal with. I mean, think about the fact that targeted individuals are accused of having a mass hallucination. Well, why? Because they're all talking about the same things, right? People, uh, They're watching me. They seem to know my personal business. They're breaking into my house. They're after me. They're trying to poison me, right? And then you get the disinformation, and that's when targets start buying into that. And of course, if you're a new target, you don't know what the hell's going on. And when people tell you something, oh, this is why it's you're a genetic, or there's some type of genetic reason, or it's because of something else, or whatever, and then it fits right into the psychiatric criteria of a delusion of grandeur, right? And then you start to build on that information, and then of course, when you try to tell somebody about this whole thing, it just not only is it logistically seemingly impossible, but it sounds arrogant, and that annoys people too. You know, really, you're just, I mean, as a human being, you're a valuable creature. Okay, but as far as what the powers that be have decided, you've been thrown into this menagerie. That's where they have decided to place you. Okay, and that's one of the most confusing aspects for targets, because they're looking around. Everything talking about stimuli, everything is based on a lateral comparison. And when you see people living their normal life and looking at you like you're some kind of freak or whatever, depending on what you're dealing with, well, that's part of the frustration. That's part of the equation. Everything is an equation. Okay. But there you are, fitting right into that little menagerie. Now you're just one of the crazy people. All right. And other people, they don't experience it. Right. And the other people who know about this stuff, which I believe is a pretty significant portion compared to what a lot of people will say. Well, I don't think a lot of people know about it. I think there are, quite a few people that know about this stuff. I've experienced some heavy harassment, and when it kicks off, there isn't anywhere you can't go where you're not going to run into these individuals. Okay. In fact, when you want to get technical, there's a high percentage of people that can be used to harass the target. Let's get back into the comments real quick. Well, I'm not sure what kind of combo is going on out there. I'm not going to read all these things. I'm just going to kind of go through it. Well, there's some pretty good dialogue going on in the comments. I'm just going to let that go ahead and go wherever it's going. But we've talked about, the major goals of the handlers, right? And ultimately, they want to reprogram you. They want to infiltrate your mind. Okay. And when you get into we'll use MK Ultra, a lot of people will talk about the Manchurian Candidate, and they will talk about the trauma and the different things that are used, the sleep deprivation, the drugs, all that stuff, the fear, the disturbing material. And a target's life is pretty disturbing, right? And there's the emotional roller coaster, which is it. They use that in the CIA handbook of torture, where they take people on these little, you know, these. Well, it's more of a way to manipulate someone. Okay, they'll take them through fear, and then they'll try to, it's like good cop, bad cop. There's a lot of techniques that can be used to get an individual into a lot of different emotional states. Okay. And when you can do all that, eventually the idea is to split, to cause so much trauma that the individual disassociates, right? And a lot of targets are in that process. I've talked about that in videos where people are wondering whether they're in a matrix or whether they're in hell, or whether they may have died, and they're like one of those movies like Jacob's Ladder, and they think they're alive still. But how is all this stuff possible? Most people that are targeted get this stuff in an onslaught, and even though their life may have been strange before, well, it just adds to that freaky menagerie. Even if you're one of those targeted individuals who's been experiencing this stuff since you were a little kid, everybody experiences that point in time to where it switches into that overt mode of intensity, right? And it's just, it doesn't seem logistically possible, right? And it becomes so prevalent and unpleasant and persistent that eventually they want to push the target into that place where they derealize. They start to disconnect with reality and disassociate. And then, of course, you have that little kid part of your personality that's in there. And that's one of the things that they want. They want to get you into that state, and then they want to incorporate other things, because if you can have different alters, there's a lot of things going on. People will take that into the Manchurian Candidate or look at the government agenda. But you know what? I think that there's more going on, and I think some of that stuff is spiritual. Okay. And they want that. They want, not only is the target isolated and experiencing a lot of deprivation, but once you get into that stage of derealization, well, what happens? It's like it's kind of like that movie Hurricane with Denzel Washington. I do believe that's the movie. He is, very resistant and complying, and they put him down in solitary confinement, and there he is by himself. And eventually, what happens? Well, he starts to slip into madness, starts talking to himself, and then pretty soon you're answering yourself. Targeted individuals experience that toxic soup that is perfect for that whole thing to manifest, right? And coupled with all the electronic harassment, the demonic stuff, the covert drugging, all the influences and stimuli that you're going to be dealing with, man, you could have a serious personality split, and who knows what's going to happen. You can have multiple ones. Okay. And so that's that. Anybody out there experience that split, by the way, just out of curiosity? Brainwashing, exactly. Anyone out there brave enough to comment on their experience with having that derealization or that, I don't know, that journey into the split mind? Well, yeah, the realization that this stuff is your reality. It's a shock to the system. But then, of course, the individual has to process that information, right? So you get to that point where you're not asleep. Okay, you can pinch yourself or stick yourself with a pin or whatever. And I'm sure there's a lot of targeted individuals who've done that. I heard a story from one guy. He went out and doused himself with a hose because he had convinced himself there's just no way that all this stuff that I'm dealing with is real. And he went out and just, cold water, just, clothes on, everything, doused himself right out in the backyard with a hose, man, just trying to wake himself up, man. And then of course, what? Well, you are awake. This is your reality. And I've talked about the fact that, just to throw a little bit of a positive spin on this dark topic, that, there's a lot of people out there that have, peaceful little existences and everything. And they're feeling happy, and they're talking about love. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those things are legitimate. But, even though you're experiencing some very dark things, and even though it's unpleasant, and you might be experiencing a lot of negative emotions, so on and so forth, you're seeing what's really out here. Okay, you are in reality. A lot of people would disagree with that, but you know where you are a lot more than you did before, a lot more than all these little Candyland clowns. No, Okay, that's the good news. But like Binks the cat was talking about, well, now that you know this is real, well, you can experience that disassociation at that point, which you can emotionally detach, right? Or you can become so fearful that the dysfunction increases. But processing that information is crucial, and not going into too much speculation into the place where you just start to either implode or explode, because we are like that. Okay, where our brains are designed to compartmentalize things, make things significant, to organize the stimuli, and rationalize all these things into a place where it makes sense. Of course, they use that against the targeted individual, right? But what's that? Well, what kind of hope do you have, right? What kind of a future can the targeted individual expect to have now that they know that they're going to be dealing with this? Not only that, but the chance that it's going to continue. Well, there's a lot of things that you might just have to realize were never there to begin with, right? Because the people out there that think they know what reality is, in the sense that they've got their little, Candyland existence or whatever, those things are really not, they're not there. Okay. It may appear that way, but it's not. The reality is those are distractions and illusions to obfuscate what is really there. A lot of people, they'll like a targeted individual will deal with an onslaught in the sense that it's just in your face. Evil is in your face, being shoved down your throat. Okay, it's there. But there's other people, oh no, that can't be real. It's not possible for someone to be harassed like that. That's just crazy. There's no such thing as a government program that would do that. Oh, secret societies, that's ridiculous. I don't think about that kind of stuff. Oh no, and they're in a fantasy land. And whatever they do have going on, well, even though it may seem like it's there, whatever kind of emotional connections and relationships they have, it's based on a type of fantasy. It's just different than yours, right? It's different stimuli. Okay. Which is more legitimate? That's the question, right? Which is more real? What the targeted individual is experiencing, or the obfuscated reality of those people out there with rose-colored glasses, right? You gotta see it for what it is. Let's take a look at the comments. Jeremy Sims, they diagnosed me with schizophrenia at age 18, and it has been going on for the past 17 years. And so I'm assuming that he's talking about the gang stalking. Okay, the targeting has been going on for 17 years after, and that's classic. The targeted individual is going to be accused of being mentally ill, right? You're going to be accused of suffering from schizophrenia, factitious disorder, a type of psychotic depressive disorder or something, right? Because of course it can't be real. Think about this for a minute, okay? For the individuals out there who've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and you might be sitting in your psychiatrist's office or your counselor's office, psychologist, whatever, and they're sitting there telling you that you are experiencing hallucinations and that you are disconnected with reality. And you know what the irony of this is? Especially if they believe that, if they believe that they are legitimate doctors and that they are legitimately going to be able to help their patients with all these psychiatric drugs and bogus, you know, diagnosis and all this crap that is basically out there for the reasons of profit and other things, the agenda. They're the ones that are crazy. They are the ones that are delusional, literally. Okay, think about it that way. How interesting and ironic is that? right? Where you get a psychologist, well, the demons aren't real. No, they're not. And they view religion as, uh, unilateral, but it's not, of course. There's two monergistic religions, and there's only one legitimate one. Getting back to the point, though, I think it's very ironic. Someone is diagnosed with schizophrenia because they're legitimately being targeted, they're legitimately being harassed, and the psychiatrist is the delusional one. That's funny to me. It's hilarious. Just me, Heidi says my experience is more how to fake your reality is with gang stalkers. Literally, excuse me, littering the environment with evil, disguised as normal. Excuse me, I don't have my glasses. Well, and that, and also the fact that targeted individuals are forced into a place where well, either they're gonna learn the hard way, or they're gonna eventually learn how to be the Hollywood targeted individual. Everything is normal, everything is fine, right? Because you have to, and you're gonna learn that eventually. If you're a new targeted individual that just walking around telling everybody about this, or giving into the emotional manipulation, is not going to work in your favor. It's just not going to happen. You really want to frustrate the perps. You really want to frustrate the handlers, the infiltrators. Well, you just act like nothing's wrong, right? You start processing information in a way where you see it as manipulation. You see this stuff as a way to get in your head and, try to control you. It's mind control, right? Well, how do you prevent it? Well, you don't react. You see it for what it is. It's awareness. Okay. Period. Well, demons are dumb says, I just got in work and I see seven people in red already. I would ignore I would ignore all that stuff. In fact, the color red is a great example of how the atmosphere around the target is is infiltrated, because they want to control how you see things. Red is a color, period. That's all it is. Okay. And it's everywhere. The environmental conditioning that targeted individuals experience makes them look crazy. All right. Because if people are, you know, paying attention to something, or they are sensitized to something, what's that going to look like to a rational person, or someone, not even a rational person, someone who just hadn't been sensitized, or someone who hadn't been attacked? And that, well, they're going to think that you're crazy. I've got red shirts. Am I a gang stalker? No, obviously not. I've owned red vehicles, you know, and it is what it is. It's just a color. It's a lot more personal when a targeted individual is attacked in a way where it's a little bit more obvious with information, or maybe something that's a little more specific. But when you get into colors and stuff like that, it's just too easy to do. If you can get a target to pay attention to that kind of thing, you kind of got them beat, because there's just no, you got to get control over your perception, right? You have to, as a targeted individual, you have to see the manipulation. One headlight, yeah, okay, whatever. And even if it is something that's going on, it doesn't matter. You know the motive, and that is to get the target into that type of atmospheric control, where you're looking at stuff, you're thinking about it all the time, you're being triggered constantly, right? It's simple. Awareness is key. Bora Bora says, I feel that YouTube is toxic. It can be. It depends. It depends on how you perceive the information. A lot of times, especially when it comes to people being sensitized as a targeted individual, I've seen this before, where someone will experience harassment, then they'll get online and they'll start watching videos and they'll just sensitize themselves with the material, right? Someone might, if a target experiences street theater or they get a break in or something, and then they get online and start looking at, oh, gang stalkers, they all wear red, or they all have one headlight, or they're following me in helicopters or whatever. Right? It doesn't matter whether that's happened or not. Now, that individual is going to be looking for that stuff. They were already being infiltrated before that, so it can be. YouTube can be toxic, but it can also be used for the good. It's like anything. It's like, murder. You could kill someone with a fork, right? You don't have to have a gun. People talk about, well, do you think should we get rid of all the guns? That's not really the problem. You're going to get rid of all the forks next? We're going to have plastic silverware? I mean, how far are you going to take it? You know? Oh, I know you're not talking about my channel, Bora Bora, but I wasn't talking about that either. I was just referencing the fact that even if a targeted individual is trying to educate themselves, they can become toxic, even if it's something that appears to be educational. It depends on what it depends on your perception. It really does. Well, guys, it's getting late. And let's let's kind of wrap this up. Unless somebody comes out with a topic that I can build on, because I think we've talked about handlers. Well, we could go into some more stuff about handlers. Um, but I want to see what you guys are thinking about. What's one of the aspect of the handler that you would like to hear about? You don't have to apologize, Bora Bora. I didn't have that proposition. I was not misunderstanding you. I took it exactly how you meant it. That YouTube in general is toxic, not that my channel is toxic or even gang stalking channels. Just YouTube in general. That's how I perceived it. But I was just making that illustration. Molding clay, they spend a whole lot of money on street theater. It's possible. Absolutely is. There could be spiritual as well. You don't know. You don't know. But to say that there's not money floating around in gang stalking, no way. There is. Okay, there is. In fact, I dealt with a guy that, and I've talked about this one before. Um, this guy was coming around, and he basically gave himself away. Didn't have a job. Didn't have a driver's license. Was running from the police, had warrants for his arrest. And all of a sudden I see this guy with a van and a Camaro. And I'm like, what? I know the guy isn't in an auto loan and he doesn't even have a job, let alone money. How is he sporting a Camaro and a van all of a sudden? And he's got a bunch of money and a leather jacket. And I'm like, what? Somebody, must have, maybe. So I talked to him and I'd caught him around the property before that. And he's like, I said, did somebody leave you some cash? I said, what happened? Did you win the lottery? What's going on? Oh no. And he was drunk. And his wife was, she was like, be quiet, and he's like, oh yeah, I was just banging around underneath the trailer. If you guys have watched my channel for any length of time or heard my stories when I lived out of the trailer out there, somebody was, taking the siding off and going underneath there and hitting it with a hammer. I'd go to lay down and go to bed at night. And, after it was, quiet and the lights were off, after like 15, 20 minutes, boom, it just smashed the bottom of it. I would talk about making you clench up, it just make you jump out of bed like a cat. And of course, so they take off and they play that game over. And so this guy said, well, where'd you get the money then? I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And his wife was, oh, we're sick. You should leave. Or, we've got the flu. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, well, what are you talking about? I mean, that vehicle's worth, $10,000. Brand new, it was about a $26,000 vehicle at the time that it was new. It was a used vehicle, but it was still worth, probably between minimum 12 to 14 grand, on a deal. And then the van, who knows how much that was worth. And the guy had a bunch of money, and of course, he had no explanation for it. But that a lot of that stuff is legitimate. And you guys have talked about the people in your neighborhood or whatever. And I know that the gentleman that I've mentioned before who suddenly thought he was working for Homeland Security, right? A lot of targets will be accused of being some type of deviant, whether it's, a sexual predator or, a drug dealer or whatever. And this guy, all of a sudden, he started getting, so he had a new stereo that, just of course happened to be so loud it could rattle my house, which, it wasn't an apartment complex, and he didn't have any money for that before. He didn't work. It just, there is money getting thrown around. Let me take a look in the comments. Uh, Staging car accidents. I don't know about that one. Um, I think that they could set up something to where might try to get you in an accident if that's what you're talking about. But I've heard targets to where they'll come across, in my opinion, a legitimate accident scene where you've got the first responders and the cops, and there's been an obvious crash, and they will believe that the whole thing was set up for them. That, to me, is when a targeted individual is starting to read into things, and that's part of that sensitization process. There used to be a lot of videos out there where you would see people, videoing accident scenes, right? And assuming that the whole thing was there for them. Maybe it was close to their house, or they were out driving, doing something, going to work, and they come across an accident scene, and they will tell you that they had a lot of strange emotional stuff going on, or maybe even a dream or something. And then there it was. And there's a theme or something like that that's involved in it. Well, that's a setup, man. But it's not a setup in the sense that the accident scene was staged just for you. That's to make you look crazy. Okay. That's that's propositional tyranny. And it's propositional tyranny with a methodology that goes behind it, to where people come to syllogistic conclusions based on stimuli, similar to when someone believes that their mind is being read. Okay. Very convincing, but it's not really what's going on. It's an illusion. Got to be careful of that stuff. And that's the danger for new targets. That's one of the biggest reasons why I promote the spiritual explanation when it comes to gang stalking, because if you take that out of the equation, you are left with nothing but the human element. And you have to come up with those conclusions, right? People are in a conscious collusion together. They're communicating in real time. They can read my mind, whatever. Not always going on like that. And that's where you get into some pretty heavy propositional tyranny. And then when you try to explain this stuff to somebody, it just makes things worse because you look even nuttier. You got to realize that one of the major motives of gang stalking is not only to get the target in a place where they have propositional tyranny or believe that they're crazy eventually, but it's to get other people to believe you're nuts too. And that's the kind of stuff that's going to, I'm hearing voices because then you have the disinformation because I'm special or I have a particular type of genome or blood type or whatever. Well, you're a human being and you're valuable and you're fitting into the menagerie of whatever you're dealing with, whether it's purely spiritual or whether you've been profiled and put into, some type of program or whatever. But at the same time, you need to simplify it, man. Okay, well, let's see. Anything else going on? Well, I just wanted to come on and do a quick live stream. Like I said before, guys, um, I just have been working a lot. I don't have a whole lot of emotional energy. And when I make videos, I take a little more time to do that. I try to make them concise and I try to make them focused and I might edit them and so on and so forth. I've been doing more live streams. Not only do I want to practice and interact with you guys, but for me, it's a lot more efficient time wise. I get off work and I can come on for an hour or two and just be done with it. Anything else out there before I get out of here? Well, we have 27 people out there. Anthony Morner says that seasoned veterans like you and me know what it's all about. It took me years to learn how to play this game. I would agree with that. I couldn't figure it out either. And I've mentioned that before that I'm not trying to come across as a know-it-all or criticize anyone or that I have, all this wisdom where I can tell you what you need to do or whatever. That's not the point. The point is I want to help out individuals who are just coming into this because it was very frightening for me. And I made all the mistakes. The only thing I didn't do, I didn't tell a whole lot of people. In fact, I was quiet about it. And that was probably the only thing I did right, you know. Um, and I also realized that there was a spiritual component to this. So I had those two benefits. Other than that, I was reading into everything. Well, guys, I think I'm going to head out there. I would like to thank you for participating. If you're out there and you're experiencing persecution, I believe that refreshment is on the way. A lot of times, targets are attacked very intensely, and it can just seem like it's never going to end, and you can get caught into that place where you're trying to figure out if there's ever going to be anything good that's going to come your way, and there is. And one of the things that you have to try to capitalize on is turn this into a positive experience in the sense that, like I mentioned earlier, rather than to think you're being driven crazy, look at this as a way where you are really seeing what is truly out there and understanding, the environment that you're in. Right? You can put on a pair of rose-colored glasses. Anybody can do that, but could they do what you are doing? Well, that's another question altogether. And to realize your need for God and to realize the reality of the spiritual dimension, well, that's something that is very valuable. Okay. And if you're one of those people that experienced gang stalking and came to the realization that Christ is real and that the spiritual dimension is real, well, you win. Okay. That's the gift that's truly going to keep on giving. God bless all of you who have helped support me. The link will be in the description. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.